wanted to get started. So we've got a couple of things that we're going to be talking about today that we hope you find useful. How many of you are current Sitefinity users? Yes? Awesome. Are there any people who are looking for Sitefinity or thinking about it? You thinking?
Go.
Awesome. So today we're going to just take a few minutes to kind of introduce who we are. We're going to talk about our partner, BankUnited, and just our journey from 2015 to the present with Sitefinity and how it's grown for them, and then do a little Q&A. Quickly, I am Mary Drack. I'm a senior project manager at Bayshore Solutions.
Yep, and my name's Scott McAtasney. I'm a senior front-end developer at Bayshore.
So we are a certified gold partner with Sitefinity. We've been developing with Sitefinity over 6+ years. We have implemented about over 40 custom solutions delivered to our clients for e-commerce, enterprise, multi-site, multilingual solutions for them. We have 8 in-house Sitefinity developers that are formally certified by Sitefinity, and we currently have Scott, who is recently the Foundation certified, so that's their new certification for development. We've won a couple awards for our sites with Sitefinity. We have a couple of Website of the Year finalists in 2016, 2017, 2018, along with a number of other awards. So that was just a real brief introduction to who we are. And we thought as part of this journey to help understand how this Sitefinity has grown for BankUnited, we just wanted to spend a little bit of time and introduce you to them. So we've had a partnership with them since 2004. We've developed actually multiple websites for them. In 2015, we completed a CMS selection that was Sitefinity, their online marketing edition, and we started out in version 8.1. We integrated their new design, a ton of functionality, and in 2018, we actually worked with them to upgrade to version 11.2, as well as integrate into an enterprise license. So they're now using features such as multi-site and things like that. We're currently in the process of redesigning the new BankUnited website, and it will continue to be in Sitefinity. So our journey from 2015 to the present, there's a couple of things that we really wanted to highlight with Sitefinity as far as features and ways that this has supported them throughout the years, and also just provide some tips to really think for the future for your clients. So that's some of the lessons that we took away from having a multi-year, multi-project with them, and we just wanted to share some of this with you. So in 2015, we implemented the OME edition of Sitefinity in version 8.2, had 6 templates. We did custom MVC widgets. We have a lot of list content. We've integrated for them a branch locator. They've got disaster recovery messaging, testimonials, biographies, rate managers, workflow. They authenticate to third-party websites off of our website, and then also state-specific content is being displayed for them. So just a high level of how we've used Sitefinity for them. And then also they were a 2016 Sitefinity Website of the Year finalist for their work, and they are actually featured on a number of case studies on Sitefinity's website.
Right. And so when we started the journey from recently, what we needed to do was upgrade from version 8.1 to 11. So to do this, we wanted to take a look at some of the best practices that we should be implementing today compared to what we were doing in 2015. Part of that was restructuring their code base. Back in 2015, when we built the site, we didn't use a theme for it, and so we wanted to, moving forward, make sure that the sites were set up for success by utilizing the theme structure of the code. Also, we wanted to streamline the upgrade process. When we first built the site, we used Sitefinity's project manager to install the site, and what we wanted to do is switch over to NuGet packages. By doing that, it allows us to allows the developers to be able to make builds on the site without losing all the Telerik DLLs. And also an outcome of that is we were able to upgrade from version 8.1 to 11 without doing incremental updates. So that saved us a lot of time in the upgrade process. And anybody that's on a version of Sitefinity that's before 7.3 would have to use the project manager to upgrade to version 8 before you could switch to NuGet packages and then start doing large upgrades. So as part of this journey, we switched them into a multi-site environment. So they had 3 existing sites, 2 that were Sitefinity solutions and 1 that was a non-Sitefinity solution. So the first thing we needed to do was bring all the content together. The non-Sitefinity solution was a manual process of building that into a Sitefinity site, putting the content in manually, and then we were able to migrate the 2 existing Sitefinity sites using SiteSync, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So some of the things that we learned as part of this process that we found useful going forward with some other projects is sharing of dynamic modules across sites. So Sitefinity does this really well. You can create dynamic modules and use those on the different sites in the multi-site environment. But one thing that we did learn was that when you're using related media as part of those dynamic modules, there's a selection of the media library that takes place when you create the module. So once that selection is made, you can't change it within the admin. And this could be a problem if you select the media library that's only associated with the individual site and not the multi-site environment. If you do make that selection, then you can no longer access media from the different sites in the different environments. So it can be changed, not through the admin. It takes database changes that are a little bit complex, and that was a lesson learned. The next thing we wanted to do was really separate the layouts and the widgets to the respective sites. As we started bringing the sites into one, we noticed that the page editors were getting pretty cluttered with widgets and layouts that weren't necessarily associated with the site that they were being displayed on. So we were able to find a way to display the relevant widgets and layouts only to their respective sites. That was done through some code changes where we extended one of the toolbox filter. And then once that was in place, you were able to go in through the admin and apply tags to each layout and widget that would only display them on their respective sites. Last thing had to do with workflows. So the workflows and roles are shared across the multi-site environment, but the permissions that are associated with them are not. So we had to go in and reset up all the permissions for the sites in the respective environments.
So for SiteSync, I don't know if anybody is using that today. If you're not, it's a really great add-on if it's not part of your license. But what it allows you to do is sync content from a staging environment to a live environment without manually having to recreate the content between both environments. So it doesn't require any database updates for you to copy over it. It does it automatically. It's pretty streamlined. It's really just a couple checks of the box. It's getting easier with version 12. Yep. So that's really exciting. But it allows you to schedule out content, publish content immediately, and it really allows you to do that in the staging environment and sync over to the live site. A couple of quick tips about the content syncing is just making sure that you're establishing a sync checklist with your team members who have that ability to publish, just so that you don't accidentally publish content that somebody else was working on that you're not ready to. So it's kind of an internal kind of checks and balances just to make sure that your team recognizes other people are in there using the CMS and you don't accidentally publish it. The other thing is just establish that process for syncing. So there's certain things that get synced as part of content updates, such as templates and widgets, and that stuff that's happening in the back end. But it needs to be present, those templates and widgets that are being used in the content need to be present on the live site. So if you've had a development update and you've gone in and created something new, a different layout, a different widget, that needs to exist before you sync over the content itself.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so we also use SiteSync to merge the two existing Sitefinity sites into one. This saved us a ton of time by not having to recreate all the content. And so some of the things that we learned from that are there can be naming conflicts. So with BankUnited, they had one of the examples that we had was a testimonial widget that they had on both of their sites. And so because those dynamic modules can be shared across sites, when we tried to bring them together, it recognized that there was a conflict in this because we use the same naming convention. So kind of our lesson learned from that was to just, by best practices, put a site, maybe abbreviation or something, to append the name of the widgets as we're creating them. So if in the future, there is a multi-site environment, we don't run into that issue again. The other thing was kind of the steps to take when you're doing this, merge into the multi-site environment. So the best practice by Sitefinity is to put the code onto the targeting server first. So what this does is it allows the base templates that you use for your site to be created within the database and not relying on the SiteSync to pull those in. What we found the first time we did it is we did the SiteSync first, it created the base template, and then when I moved the code into the targeting server, it duplicated that template. So then we had multiple base templates, and it was kind of hard to figure out which one was which and which one we should be using. So yeah, it's always best to do the code first, let that be established, and then come back and do the content. And that way the content knows which base template it should be using based off the IDs that are created in the database.
The next thing we just wanted to touch on is workflow management. So out of the box, Sitefinity comes with a kind of a two-step workflow approval. We have implemented two different types of workflow for a client. Depending on the type of content that they're publishing, it determines which workflow it goes through, which people have to approve it. The workflows can be role-based, permission-based, content-based, based on your needs. And what's really great about it is if you're in an industry where you need legal or compliance review of your content prior to publishing that's something you're able to do within Sitefinity using their workflow management, as opposed to a manual outside of the system process where you have to send them copies of stuff to get approved and then implement it into the website. Very useful.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
So kind of in conclusion, really just we're hoping that some key takeaways for you are that you're thinking for the future. Just best practices when you set up your Sitefinity project and when you're trying to grow into either a different version or a different license or enable multi-site for your solution. They're just quick things that we've highlighted, but just wanted to spend a little bit more time on because they were key takeaways for us, and it will also help you be successful down the line if you keep these in mind.
Yeah. Like I said, in version 8, themes had just become like kind of prevalent in the Sitefinity best practices. I'm not sure that you can build a site now without setting them up in themes, but it should definitely be done. That way, if you are moving sites from different environments, you can just grab that themes folder out and put it in the new site. It makes things a lot easier. Unique naming conventions, something that we talked about was a lesson learned. We pretty much always just take like an abbreviation of the client name or a Bayshore abbreviation to put in front of all our widgets, just so we don't ever have an issue where we have conflicts with names. The workflows, permissions are set at the site level, so when you're setting up those multi-site environments, that you will have to go in and make sure that the permissions if the permissions are the same per site, you would still have to manually go in and set those up again.
For content management, there's a lot of great things that come enabled with Sitefinity out of the box, but as a backend developer, there's a lot of tools that you can do to make it a lot easier for your end users to manage their content. Some of the naming conventions that Scott talked about are very helpful for a user to try to pick out what content or layout they're trying to pull onto a page. we spend a lot of time to make sure that usability is really great on the front end of the site, but it's also really easy for somebody to edit content. And sometimes that is just improving something that you've done once users get in there and start using it, and integrating something to make their life a little bit easier.
And Sitefinity really gives you a lot of tools for doing that. We've talked a little bit about dynamic widgets, and you can create custom widgets for your the end users that just essentially makes them a little form that they can fill out to help streamline the content process. And by doing that, it really kind of takes the worry out of the content editor's hands and lets them know that every time that they're doing a piece of content, it's going to look the same, as it should, and it's going to look as it was intended to be designed. And there's a lot of things that you can extend within Sitefinity to help with that. And we do a lot of custom layouts when we're building rich design sites, and that can start to get confusing in the back end because you're trying to name this layout based off of a design. And once the content editors are in there, it can be confusing because if you have a lot of layouts that are similar that just change by a little bit, it can be difficult to know which one you should be using. So something that we've learned recently is that you can apply thumbnails of that design to those layouts, and by doing that, it gives them a visual representation of the layout that they're going to drag onto the page, so they know exactly what the design is going to look like going forward. And I think the last thing we had in conclusion was site sync publishing. In the current version that we were on, version 11, there was no conflict management. So if updates were being made in a live environment and a staging environment, whatever the syncing server is going to override those live site updates. So that's just something to know. And I think if you know that ahead of time, it's pretty easy to avoid those. But you just know that if you make an update in live and then sync from dev, it's going to overwrite that. But I also heard that in version 12, that's been corrected, so that shouldn't be an issue going forward.
Yeah.
Can you do the other way as well?
I think in version 12, you can sync both ways. I don't believe that you can. Well, I take that back, because on each server, you can set up like the target server and the receiving server, so you probably just could make a reverse relationship and do it that way if you wanted to sync backwards. So.
But again, I think if you establish your best practice for publishing content, really, I would say 99% of the time you should be doing it in your staging environment and then syncing to live. It avoids just any mistakes to your live site, allows you to test it. So if your best practice is that you're always publishing from server A to server B, you shouldn't come into these conflicts. Just something to be aware of.
And you could even set up a workflow that prevents people from making those updates on live. So, you just lock down your live server, and then if you have your staging server where all the content entries being done, that kind of protects your live environment. And some of the things that I've seen in some of these previous ones with Site Sync version 12 is that they've kind of streamlined the process where you can sync from a publish. So you don't have to go into the Site Sync settings to initiate the sync. On the content level, as you're publishing it, there's a publish button, and then as part of the drop down, there's a sync, publish and sync, which could save you a little bit of time as opposed to having to go into the Site Sync settings and doing it.
Yep, and it also makes it just a little bit safer for an end user to determine, is this really what I want to publish? And you edited that page and it was locked to you, so you're not publishing somebody else's content.
Yeah.
Any questions about our journey or kind of thinking? Go ahead.
Yeah, so go back to the site sync. It sounds like a lot of your goal after is having content editors update staging and then using site sync to update the content on the live site.
Yes.
Why not just do things on the live site since you can have things in drafts and then publish?
I think the main reason is once you publish it on live, if there's no workflow in place, then it's live, And so I think from a testing practices, like a best practice in terms of testing, if you just want to make sure that what you're doing looks the way you want it to before you send it to a live environment, I think it's just a little bit safer. So I know plenty of our clients don't have staging environments, and they do most of their updates in live. So it's certainly a practice that a lot of people use. And I'm not saying that either way is kind of right or wrong, but if you have the resource to have a staging environment, it just gives you a little bit of a buffer, in case something goes wrong, or if you're publishing a script or something like that that conflicts with other scripts on your site, it can lock down that page or start throwing errors. Yeah.
Yes.
You may have already mentioned it, but were you, for the BankUnited instance, was that on-prem or cloud?
So we have a development environment on our site, but they host it on their site. Is that
It's
what you're asking
on-premise,
for?
though.
Yeah.
It's not in the cloud.
Yeah.
And one more question.
Yes.
I noticed you guys jumped from 8.1, I think you said, to 11.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
How far down the version path do you think you should go before you start getting concerned about, flipping the switch to more versions? I mean, do you guys think one version, two?
So we definitely, that was a big concern for us because it was a scary prospect going from 8 to 11, because I think around version 9 and 10 there was some pretty significant changes in Sitefinity. By switching over to NuGet packages, like that whole upgrade process really gets streamlined. So Sitefinity is confident in their upgrade process that you could make large jumps like that. So we thought we would give it a shot and see.
Yeah.
And I would say that there was a few bugs after the upgrade was done that we had to kind of sort through. But for the most part, it was a lot less painful than we thought it was going to be.
A previous best practice for Sitefinity was they didn't make it. You really couldn't go any more than 3 versions at a time. Mm-hmm. So if you, and a version was considered each level. Yeah. So if 7 had 3 releases, then you had to get through all of 7 to upgrade to 8. That changed. Mm-hmm. Once you're on 8.1, that NuGet practice is mm-hmm. available. If you're on an older site, you kind of got to get to 8.1, and then you can make that jump. So it's just something to keep in mind.
And it's something that we kind of do on a per site basis. Obviously, the more customizations that you have on the site, the bigger the risk is. With BankUnited, we were able to use a lot of the Sitefinity default tools and just extend them a small enough degree that we weren't really that concerned with it breaking the site as a whole. It definitely was, but yeah.
There's a lot of benefit in upgrading your versions. Sorry.
They said this week the version 12 launched. I think they said by the end of next month, version 12.2 will come out.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then shortly before the end of the year, we'll have version 12.3.
Yeah, I think they were targeting 3 releases this year, 1 in July. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's really it's a hard thing to sell to clients sometimes when they don't feel like that there's anything wrong. A lot of times there's security updates that come in these releases, and that's the best selling point on why to upgrade. With version 12 coming out, there's a lot of new features that are going to improve the user experience. So those are good reasons to push for an upgrade too.
Yeah, definitely the security. So Sitefinity does release security patches. If there's a vulnerability that exists, they'll release it for each version of the website. But there's just improvements in the whole base code that happens in each of the versions. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's based on feedback from the user community that this would be easier if I could do it this way, or I'm having this issue constantly. Like those types of things get resolved and get incorporated mm-hmm. into it. So Sitefinity does do a really good job of kind of getting that user community feedback on, like, we like this feature, but if you did 2 more things, it would make our life a lot easier to use it. So
yeah, like in version 12, the dynamic forms is, that's something that we've been waiting for a long time, because so many of our clients have these dynamic, like these requests for dynamic forms where, fields are displayed based off other selections, and that was always really difficult to do in Sitefinity. You really had to do some custom development in order to accomplish that. So to get that out of the box is going to be a big push for a bunch of our clients. We're going to be definitely utilizing that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. You guys have any other questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate you guys coming and listening to us.
Absolutely. And there are mimosas in the back if you're interested.
Keep the party going.